Every story has a beginning, Legionnaire Jordan, and it's time you learned the story of GSP.
GS who?
George St Pierre, one of the greatest fighters to ever step into the arena, one of the greatest fighting champions of all time, a man who reigns as the welterweight champion for over 2,000 days while defending his title belt over 9 times. GSP is a man other men fear and dread. When people see GSP, they see an elite fighter, a true alpha, a man no one wants to mess with, one of the greatest fighters of all time. But do you think he was always like that? Do you think he just appeared out of thin air like a warrior?
He was probably born strong, I guess. He was lucky.
You see, Legionnaire Jordan, it's very easy to judge a book by its cover. Not everything is as it seems. Let's travel back to see how this story started. The story of George St Pierre started off a lot different than most people think. He never started off as a strong warrior. He was not naturally strong. In fact, it was quite the opposite. George grew up in a small country town in Canada. When George was growing up, he was weak and quite small. He was an easy target for bullies to harass. George used to have the habit of licking his lips too much, making the skin around his mouth peel and go red. The bullies at school used to call him the ugly clown. He was an easy picking. But the bullying at school didn't stop with name calling. Bullies much older than George would surround him in the schoolyard. They would beat him up and steal his lunch money. The bullies would often go as far to strip George of his clothes, leaving him exposed and humiliated and to be laughed at by the other school kids. This happened day after day, week after week. And when it was time to go home, the bullies would stalk George and grab him. They would beat him up and push him around on the bus, day after day, week after week, kicking and punching him, leaving him bruised and battered. This beating and bullying went on for a long time. But one day, George came home and his dad noticed the bruising and said, "George, what are these black marks? What's going on? You must tell me." George replied, "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." "Tell me now, George," his father said. "The bullies, they beat me up at school." "Bullies, hey? Well, there's only one way to solve that. Listen, son, there's 2 roads to take in life. You can either be an eternal victim or you can fight back. You see, bullies always pick on the weak. They go out of their way to pick weak and easy targets. They target people who are small and easy to pick on. It's time I take you to the karate school where you will learn how to build up your strength and how to defend yourself." So this is the point where George's life changed forever. He had chosen to walk down the path of beginning to become a warrior and never look back. George arrived at the karate school and began to train. The exciting world of martial arts was beginning to open up to him. He learned about techniques for punching, kicking, blocking, and evasive maneuvers. There were other kids training at the school, but the way George trained was different. George trained with a burning fire in his eyes. For him, the training wasn't about earning the black belts, it was about stopping the black eyes. Some kids trained as a hobby, whereas George saw his training as a way to fight for his own future, for his life. He was beginning to transform from someone who was a powerless victim into someone who began to emanate power. His past experiences made him train more intensely and more ferociously. He used the suffering of his past to fuel his energy and training. The nightmares and bruises of the past were like an energetic potion for him. When most kids were too tired to continue training and wanting to stop, George would continue. And after much dedication and learning in the gym, George found himself back at the school in an all too familiar situation. 3 older bullies had George surrounded and told him to hand over his lunch money. But instead of meekly complying like a victim of the past, George looked them in the eye with a steely resolve and told them no. The bullies were outraged. One went in to hit George, but George could see it coming. He sidestepped the bully and hit him with a lightning right hook, making the bully collapse like a sack of potatoes. The other bully came in to hit George, but again he ducked and landed a strong counter-right cross right on the chin, making him collapse too. The third bully, seeing his two comrades defeated, ran away in fear. Never again was George harassed at the school. But George didn't stop there. George's passion for fighting grew like a volcanic eruption. He returned to the karate gym and continued to hone his skills. He learned different skills such as boxing, wrestling, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. After successfully defending himself at school, he set out to conquer the fighting world in the fighting arena. And multiple fights later, and multiple world championship titles, George will go down as one of the greatest fighters of all time. And it was all because he was put in an unfortunate situation, but he chose to take brave and positive action. You see, Legionnaire Jordan, in life, no one gets to choose whether they are born small or weak. No one gets to choose whether they are born into wealth or into poverty. And no one gets to choose whether there will be bad bullies in the schoolyard waiting for them. But you can choose how you react to the situations and circumstances that come your way in life. You can choose what positive action you can take. In George's situation, he chose to take action, to train, to put on muscle, and to fight back. In life, you can either choose to be an eternal victim, or you can choose to take real positive action, like George, to better yourself and become a champion. There's always hope, and with that, there's only one last thing to do.
What's that, Tiberius?
Let's toast to victory! To victory! To victory! To victory! To victory!